Alright, welcome back for the final installment of the Three Princes of Serendip. We're going to get right into the story as soon as we get this going right here. Okay, good. Just a little bit of light for the enjoyment. Alright. This is one paragraph from where we left off here. We'll just go ahead and recap a tiny bit. Basically, the golden bird has saved the princes from the king of the sea dragons, but they're just not sure whether or not they're safe. They're on their way back to the capital city of their home country of Serendip, and that city is called Anuradhapura. As they started in the same direction, the three brothers, even in the faint light before dawn, could see that growing things about them all looked dry and stiff. Passing villages, they heard the cries of little children waking from sleep, but even when the approaching day spread a fan of rosy light in the east, no birds sang. Everything seemed strangely silent except the sound made by the galloping feet of the horses. When the sun came up, round and golden, the princes neared the farmhouse where they had stopped and asked for water to drink just before they departed from Serendip. Balakrama felt a sudden pounding of his heart. Coming forth from the doorway of the house was a young woman, graceful as a jasmine vine stirred by a summer's wind. In an instant he saw that she was Podihamine, the same whose image he had long and tenderly carried in his heart. At that moment, however, the Dragon King reappeared high in the sky. Headlong, he dove toward the very spot where the young girl stood. His scales shone with the colors of green seaweed and old bronze. Like sapphires and emeralds were the jewels of his crown, blazing in the sunlight. Unarmed, the oldest prince leapt from his horse and rushed fearlessly at the great monster. A moment later, his two brothers did the same. But in grappling with the slimy wings and tail of the Dragon King, the princes felt themselves grow suddenly weak. It was as if all the rivers of their strength flowed from them into the fierce and ugly beast. His long tongue greedily licked the unfortunate Podihamine, and his claws reached out for her. With a scream, she crumpled and sank to the earth. The brothers could hardly keep their feet on the ground. With little effect they grasped and tugged at the writhing monster. As their hope for success waned, a shadow passed over. Glancing up, the princes saw in the glory of the morning sunlight the bird of the night before. His wings were spread, and now the brothers could plainly see that he held in his beak a cylinder of silver. It could be none other than Athenum. From the cylinder, as he dipped for a moment into their sight, he let fall a single drop of liquid, which landed upon the head of the Dragon King. At this, the royal beast was caught up in a dark cloud by the wind, blown across the land, and dropped far out towards the sea. As for Podihamine, with eyes closed, she lay unmoving on the ground. Her scream, however, had brought her father, mother, and neighbors running to her side. They gathered around as Balakrama took her hand and spoke to her softly, and the girl, unharmed, but still fearful, opened her eyes. When she saw that the dragon had vanished, she rose to thank the brave young men who had come to her rescue. In this moment she recognized that they were three travelers she had seen so long before. Balakrama wanted to stay and talk with the fair Podihamine, but he was also in great haste to see his father. So, promising to return, he mounted his horse, and the three continued on their way to Anuradhapura. After journeying for some time, the princes found themselves one morning before daylight approaching the great capital city. Taking a way which led towards the south and east, they rode between thick forests. Here they heard the trumpeting of bullfrogs and the familiar call of cicadas. After being so long away, even these seemed like music to the three brothers. Then, finally, the capital city lay before them in the early light of dawn. They saw again the great gold dust dagoba, where flower offerings always lay. These seemed few from what they now remembered. "Where water is lacking," Vijayo said, "blossoms are also." Balakrama said, "The people have brought what they have, yet even at this distance it seems the petals are small and poor in color." As the sun rose, it still fell with splendor on the brazen roof of the storied monastery standing near the center of the city. Nearby, people went about their work. The streets and shops were filled with the sound of busy voices, but hardly any laughter was heard, as if the hearts of men and women were as low as the waters in the tanks. The royal palace had many buildings. First, the three brothers went to their own apartments. After bathing and dressing again as princes, they hurried to the handsome structure where the king lived. Here, before entering, they removed their sandals and set them in a careful row outside the doorway. When at last they were admitted to their father, they had time for but a quick glance at him before they bowed their faces to the floor with deep respect. Yet in that instant the brothers saw Jaiya resting on a great couch and looking much older than they remembered him. His hair was white now, and many were the lines of care in his kindly face. Permitted at once to rise, they stood in front of the king, while Balakrama, for his brothers and himself, spoke first. "Every day we have longed to see your noble face," he said. "So now our hearts overflow with gratitude that your majesty has called us home. Yet we grieve to find you, sir, so ill. Moreover, in shame and sorrow we stand here, because we have failed most miserably in our search for the formula called death to dragons. Except for a tiny fragment with only the 6 lines already known to us, the words on the precious scroll were utterly destroyed by fire before we came upon them." King Jaiya opened his eyes wide. Over his face passed an expression of deep disappointment, which he seemed out of politeness to be trying vainly to conceal. Balakrama bowed and continued, "Alas, sir, we cannot show your majesty even the silver case of Athenicius. It was seized by the golden bird, who flew away after filling it with naught but our own tears, wept over the wretched plight of the people of Kuhabad. So," he continued, "we can only beg your royal forgiveness as we return in robes of failure." King Jaiya said, "Whatever has happened, I bid you welcome. My love for you was too strong to bear your absence any longer." Then he questioned them concerning all their adventures of which he had not yet heard. So they told him at length about their encounter with the Dragon King, the unexpected aid brought by the great bird, and concerning other happenings too. After some time had passed in this way, a royal servant appeared with a message. Slowly, King Jaiya unfastened the letter, then, evidently astonished, sat up straight. He looked at his 3 sons. "Sped by swift couriers," he said, "here is good news from one of my officials. He says that on our shores lie multitudes of lifeless dragons, including a creature with a jeweled crown, but in the seas there are none." The 3 princes stood silent with amazement as their father continued. "This message also tells me that some of our people looking up into the sky have seen a great bird carrying a cylinder of silver. From it, as they watched, drops of some mysterious fluid fell into our tanks and canals." The king's voice rose with excitement. "Listen to this," he said, now reading from the scroll. "Wherever these drops have fallen, the waters seem to have risen like magic fountains. The people who have are sharing with those who have not. Already your majesty's subjects with raised spirits are busy repairing the reservoirs and waterways." "What can this mean?" said the 3 princes almost all at once. "It means," King Jaiya said, "that my sons need not be ashamed to stand before their father. Although you have not brought me a written scroll with the formula death to dragons, your tears of compassion for the poor and afflicted are the very potion itself. With help from the golden bird, they have not only spelled death for the fierce dragons, but also seem to have brought us an abundance of life-giving water and new heart." At these words the princes were filled with happiness, and their father found more than happiness, for his health returned quickly, and he rejoiced with all his people when soon a great rain fell upon the land, and the wide tanks, now well repaired, were filled to overflowing. In the days that followed, King Jaiya, after talking earnestly with the princes, gave his consent for the marriage of Vijayo to the accomplished and charming Princess Purandot of Persia, In that country, the emperor made him a royal governor in charge of one of the chief districts of his empire, and he sat on a silver throne. Also, Prince Rajasingha was given his father's permission to marry the beauteous Queen Parvati. For years to come, and in great felicity, he ruled by her side. King Jaiya, meanwhile, received letters from many monarchs, each wishing to arrange a marriage for one of his daughters to His Royal Highness Prince Balakrama. But the love of this young man for fair Podihamine remained steadfast. In the simple garb of a mahout, and riding upon Kandula, the great elephant, with all of his fancy trappings laid aside, the oldest prince stopped to see her many times. Thus he learned that she, without knowing he was a prince, returned his affection. Hearing of this, King Jaiya called the young woman to the palace, where full of surprise and wonder she came with her father. When the king, who received her in kindly fashion, discovered that she was not only beautiful, but was like his oldest son gentle with plants and living things, he spoke to Balakrama. "Someday," he said, "you will rule in my place, and even now you bring me strength and comfort. With joy for your happiness, therefore, I consent to your marrying the fair Podihamine. She has her father's blessing and loves you well." The wedding of Balakrama took place in Serendip with great rejoicing. The people marched through Anuradhapura in a glad parade. Adorned with jeweled trappings, at the head of it walked Kandula. Later, rich and poor alike all feasted, and since there were no longer any dragons in the sea, storytellers came from many lands to entertain. Thus, the three princes of Serendip all became rulers, each so filled with virtue, wisdom, and science, that governing well he was much beloved. As for the golden bird, some say that he was last seen flying high above the wild mountain valleys, near the ancient and holy peak of great Serenity, and that as he flew, 1,000 tears falling from the cylinder of silver turned into rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. Others say that sometimes still, when least expected, the golden bird dips into sight, but is seen only by those who are looking up. And the end of the story is one final song, the pantoum for the golden bird. He flies a jewel of surprise, with sudden winging out of night. For those who dream with lifted eyes, the golden bird may dip in sight. With sudden winging out of night, as 1,000 tears turn into gems, the golden bird may dip in sight, to crown the brave with diadems. As 1,000 tears turn into gems, for those who dream with lifted eyes, to crown the brave with diadems, he flies a jewel of surprise. That's the end of the story. I want to read one other thing for you, though, and I think that we've got the time to do it in. So this is just a little bit about where we took the word serendipity. Serendip is another name for the beautiful island of Ceylon, and from Serendip came the word serendipity. One of the happiest words in our language, it was coined by the English author Horace Walpole, who lived from 1717 to 1797. And he was someone that read this folk tale before it was written in this version, but in a more original version from Persia. The Merriam-Webster Unabridged Dictionary defines serendipity as the gift of finding valuable or agreeable things not sought for. Just like the princes, you know, they were looking for one thing, but they kept finding another. But gradually, with their perseverance in the use of their kindness, the employment of their great valor and courage, and their wisdom, they ended up being successful in the long run and learning that compassion was the actual way to defeat all the dragons. being so compassionate that they could weep for the suffering of other people. So I want to give you just a little bit of a tour around what we've got left. A quick celebration first for all of the happy couples. We've got the Emperor and Balakrama, as well as each of the princes and their wonderful brides represented here. Rajasingha, the youngest, of course, was married to the queen in India. And then the emperor's sister was married to the middle brother, Vijayo, and Balakrama, of course, ended up with his wonderful simple farmer's daughter, the maid Podihamine. So, and the emperor himself with Balakrama, I already said that at the beginning, but that's so exciting. 4 amazing couples came out of this story. And remember again, folks, that silver cylinder is also very useful for containing the tears of compassion that can defeat any dragons. Alright, gosh darn it, I don't know how else to end this other than to say that that's my representation right there of, I guess it's serendipity in the end, isn't it? She's smiling on us anytime we use our kindness, our courage, and our wisdom to persevere. I'll show you one more thing that got me through all the reading of this story. This is a little thing I call the pendulum of perseverance. And oh look, there's a golden bird that's flying high above to drop the tears of compassion and destroy all the dragons. Okay, I'm a little punchy. It's a little late, but thanks for joining me for this tale, and I hope you'll share it with anyone else that needs something that's a little bit inspirational, or maybe just a way to go to sleep. Thank you so much for participating in this. It's meant a lot to me to read the story to you, and yeah, have a wonderful day, a wonderful tomorrow, and remember those 3 things to bring with you into every challenge, right? Kindness, courage, and wisdom. Do the best you can.